You promised you would claim me.
I am a coward.
Of all the humiliations I have endured in this life, this was the one that hurt the most.
Tell me, brother. If I withdraw the claim right now, would you claim her? Or is your pride just bruised? I could not allow that to happen.
She had never been able to shift. The prince rejected her in front of everyone. What she did not expect was that the Alpha King, his brother, would take his place and claim her. The sound of swords echoed through the training fields before the sun had even touched the castle towers. Maya twisted her body, dodging the strike that sliced the air where her neck had been a second earlier, and countered with a precision that drew a surprised grunt from her opponent. The guard stepped back 2 paces, adjusting his stance, his eyes narrowing with something between reluctant respect and irritation. "You fight like you have something to prove," he said, raising his sword again. Maya did not answer. She simply advanced. The metal sang when their blades met, and she used the force of the impact to spin, striking the guard's back with the hilt of her sword. He dropped to his knees in the damp earth, defeated for the 3rd time that morning. "She always has something to prove." A female voice cut through the silence that followed. "That is what happens when you are born broken." Maya did not need to turn to know who had spoken. She recognized that tone, sweet on the surface, poisonous underneath, the same way she recognized the scars on her own hands. Lady Stella, daughter of one of the king's advisors, watched from the stone bleachers, surrounded by other noble girls who giggled softly, like hyenas waiting for scraps of a wounded prey. "How many years has it been, Maya?" Stella continued, descending the steps with the practiced grace of someone trained to wound without leaving visible marks. 22? 23? And your wolf is still asleep. Maybe it died inside you. Maybe you are just this. The defeated guard got up and hurried away, as everyone did whenever the palace wolves decided to toy with their favorite target. Maya felt heat rise up her neck, but kept her expression steady. She had learned over the years that any reaction only fed the flames. Any tear was a trophy. Any tremor in her voice was victory for them. "My wolf," Maya said, lowering her sword with deliberate calm, "does not define my blade, as you just witnessed." Stella's smile faltered for a moment, only a moment, before settling back in place. "A blade will not warm your bed at night, dear, and it certainly will not make Prince Cedric look at you as anything more than entertainment." The words struck exactly where they were meant to. Maya felt the hit somewhere deep, in that place she guarded with walls built higher each year. But she did not let it show. "Excuse me," she said, sliding her sword back into its sheath. "Some of us earn our place here with effort, not with a last name." She walked away before she could see the fury on Stella's face, before she could hear anything else. The castle corridors were cool at that hour, still empty of the movement that would fill the place once the sun climbed higher. Maya walked in silence, her footsteps echoing against the ancient stone, trying not to think about Stella's words. Entertainment. Was that what she was to Cedric, after all these years? She remembered the first day she saw him, when she was only 12 years old, and he, the same age, crossed the training fields as if the entire world existed just to admire him. His golden hair glinting under the sun, his easy smile, the posture of someone who already knew he would be adored. Maya had been on the ground that day, knocked down by a strike she failed to anticipate, her mouth full of dirt and her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. Cedric had stopped, looked at her, and offered his hand. "You fell in a very impressive way," he had said, with that smile that made people forget how to breathe. "Want to try again?" And she tried. She tried every day for the next 10 years. She got up after every fall, swallowed every humiliation, trained until her muscles screamed and her hands bled. All because at some point between shared training sessions and stolen conversations, her heart decided it belonged to him. Cedric never promised anything. That was the perfect cruelty of the situation. He never spoke words that could be held against him. Only glances that lingered a second too long. Casual touches that felt far too intentional to be accidents. Smiles meant only for her in crowded halls. Crumbs. Crumbs she gathered with both hands, convincing herself that one day they would become something whole. You are special, Maya. Different from the others. He said that sometimes, when they were alone in the stables or walking through the gardens after training. And she believed it. How could she not, when his eyes found hers through crowds? When he chose her to sit beside him during informal meals? When he whispered jokes in her ear during boring ceremonies, making her bite her lip to hide a laugh? But Cedric also disappeared. He would vanish for days with other women, return with stories Maya pretended not to hear, and then come back to her as if nothing had happened. As if she were a safe harbor he could always return to, no matter how many storms he chose to face with others. Maya stopped before one of the corridor windows, looking down at the training fields. From there, she could see the soldiers beginning their morning routines, small figures moving in familiar patterns. And then her eyes caught something else. A solitary figure on the highest terrace of the eastern tower. Still, watching. King Kalen. Maya felt something strange run down her spine. Not fear, not exactly, but an acute awareness of being seen. She knew, even from that distance, even without being able to distinguish his features, that his eyes were fixed on her. It was not the first time. Over the years, Maya had noticed Cedric's older brother in unexpected moments. In the training fields, when she thought no one was paying attention. In the corridors, when she carried reports to the commanders. In the gardens, when she helped the old healer gather herbs. Kalen was always there, watching, never approaching. He was everything Cedric was not. Where the prince was light and warmth and easy laughter, the king was shadow and silence, and a gravity that made people straighten their posture instinctively. 7 years older than his brother, Kalen had taken the throne far too young, after their father's early death, and carried the weight of the crown with a seriousness that bordered on absolute. Maya looked away from the tower, her heart beating a little faster than it should. Why is he always watching everything? She pushed the thought aside. She had no time for riddles, not when her own life was already complicated enough. The great hall was decorated with crimson and gold banners when Maya entered that night, feeling out of place in her simple dress among the silks and brocades of the nobility. The celebration honored the return of the warriors from the northern border, a victory that had guaranteed months of peace, and the entire castle seemed to pulse with music, laughter, and the scent of spiced wine. She should have been in the back, with the other servants and lower-ranking soldiers. But Cedric had insisted. "Stay where I can see you," he had said earlier, with that smile that still made her stomach twist. "It's going to be a special night." Maya had no idea what that meant, but hope, that stubborn creature that refused to die, had awakened in her chest. She found a discreet corner near one of the columns, from where she could observe the hall without drawing much attention. The nobles danced in the center, a whirl of colors and elegant movements. The elders spoke in groups, their deep voices blending with the musicians' melody. And on the elevated throne at the back of the hall, Kalen watched everything with the same unreadable expression as always. Maya caught herself staring at him before realizing what she was doing. The king wore black that night, always black, as if he refused any color that might soften his presence. His dark hair was tied at the nape, revealing the strong line of his jaw and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He did not dance. He did not smile. He simply existed there, a gravitational force everyone felt while pretending to ignore. As if sensing the weight of her gaze, Kalen turned his head. His eyes met Maya's across the crowded hall. She felt the air leave her lungs. There was something in that look, an intensity that did not match the distance between them, a question she did not know how to answer. For an insane moment, Maya had the feeling that the king could see through all her defenses, all her masks, straight into the place where she kept her deepest wounds. Then Cedric appeared beside her, breaking the spell. There you are. He held 2 glasses of wine, his grin wide, and his eyes shining with something she could not immediately identify. I was looking for you. Maya accepted the glass he offered, trying to calm the racing of her heart. You said it would be a special night, she murmured. What did you mean by that? Cedric took a long sip of wine before answering. There was a flush on his cheeks that revealed this was not his first glass, perhaps not even his third. The crescent moon ritual, he said, his voice slightly louder than necessary. It's in 2 weeks. Maya felt her stomach drop. The ritual was the ceremony in which wolves claimed their mates, an ancient tradition, heavy with meaning, that determined alliances and sealed destinies. She had watched several over the years, always from the shadows, always knowing her place in that sacred circle was impossible. How could she be claimed if she did not even have a wolf? I know, she said, keeping her voice neutral. What does that have to do with me? Cedric stepped closer, so close she could feel his warmth, the scent of wine on his breath. Everything, he whispered. It has everything to do with you. And then, before she could process those words, he turned to the group of young nobles who had gathered nearby, drawn to Cedric's natural magnetism like moths to a flame. Did you all hear that? Cedric's voice cut through the surrounding conversations, loud enough for a dozen people to hear. At the next crescent moon ritual, I'm going to claim Maya. The silence that followed was absolute. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Around her, stares multiplied, surprised, curious, some openly hostile. The whispers began almost immediately, spreading through the hall like fire through dry straw. The prince is going to claim her, but she does not have. She must have bewitched him. This is a joke, right? Maya wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole. But also, and she hated herself for it, she felt hope burst inside her chest like a sunrise. He chose me. After all these years, he finally chose me. Cedric turned to her, his triumphant smile clearly satisfied with the reaction he had provoked. Surprise, he said softly. Maya opened her mouth to respond, to question, to say anything that wasn't just standing there like a fool, when her eyes, acting on their own, sought the throne at the back of the hall. Kalen was no longer watching the crowd. He was looking directly at her, and the expression on his face, something like contained concern, sent a chill racing down Maya's spine. The following days were a whirlwind. News of Cedric's declaration spread through the castle like a sickness, infecting every conversation, every stare, every interaction. Maya could not cross a single corridor without hearing her name whispered, without feeling judgmental eyes on her back, without catching the poorly hidden, spiteful smirks. Training became harder. The other soldiers, who once ignored her with an almost respectful indifference, now seemed determined to prove she was not worthy of standing among them, much less of becoming a prince's chosen mate. "Cheap shot!" the commander roared when Maya hit the ground for the 3rd time that morning, knocked down by an obviously illegal move. "Reset!" The guard who had taken her down, a big man with a scar cutting across his face, did not apologize. He only smiled, baring his teeth. "The future lady of the prince needs to learn to defend herself better," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or does she plan on using other talents?" Laughter. Always laughter. Maya got up, ignoring the pain in the shoulder she had landed on. She raised her sword and attacked. This time, she did not follow the rules either. The guard collapsed with a shout of surprise when she struck the side of his knee, dropping him, and pressed her blade to his throat before he could react. My talents, she said, breathless but steady, are right here. Would you like me to demonstrate any others? The silence on the training grounds was absolute. Maya stepped back, sheathed her sword, and walked off without looking behind her. Only when she was far enough, hidden in the shadows of the stable, did she allow her hands to tremble. 2 weeks. I just need to hold on for 2 more weeks. You're bleeding. The voice made her jump. Maya turned, heart racing, and found Kaelin standing at the stable entrance, the sunlight casting a golden outline around his dark silhouette. Your Majesty. She bowed quickly, trying to hide her still shaking hands. I didn't know you were here. Kaelin did not move. His eyes, storm gray, she realized now that he was closer than he had ever been, dropped to her shoulder, where a red stain was beginning to spread through the fabric. You should see the healer. It was not a suggestion. It was an order wrapped in the calmest voice in the world. It's just a scratch, Maya said, hating how small her voice sounded. It happens during training. It should not happen like that. Kaelin stepped into the stable, and she resisted the instinct to step back. I saw what he did. The blow was intentional. Maya blinked, startled. You saw? Something flickered across the king's face, too fast to identify, before his usual neutral expression settled back in place. I watch my soldiers, he said. All of them. But you don't watch all of them the way you watch me, Maya thought, and immediately despised herself for it. What did she know about what the king did or did not do? Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty, she said, forcing her voice to steady. I'll see the healer. She moved to walk past him, but Kaelin did not step aside. For one agonizing moment they stood there, she trying not to breathe, he looking at her with an intensity that made her blood run faster. Maya. He said her name as if testing its weight on his tongue. Are you sure you know what you're doing? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? Kaelin hesitated. Hesitation looked strange on him. A king who made life and death decisions without flinching, who commanded armies with a single word, who made nobles tremble with one glance. My brother, he began, then stopped. His jaw tightened visibly. Cedric is impulsive. He acts on excitement and often retreats when reality sets in. Maya felt something cold spread through her stomach. What are you trying to say? I am saying you deserve someone who is certain. Kaelin's eyes met hers, and there was something there. Something she could not name. Something that made her heart beat in the wrong rhythm. Someone who does not need a glass of wine to find courage. The silence between them stretched, heavy with meanings Maya could not, or would not, decipher. Cedric chose me, she finally said, the words sounding more defensive than she intended. For the first time in my entire life, someone chose me. I won't question that. Something shut down in Kaelin's expression. As you wish. He stepped aside, clearing the way for her to pass. Tend to that wound. Maya walked past him, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the scent of pine and leather and something else, something that made her head spin in ways it shouldn't. She did not look back as she walked toward the castle. If she had, she would have seen Kaelin still standing at the stable entrance, his fists clenched, his eyes following her every step, as if he were battling something far greater than himself. Lady Sarah Valtoria arrived at the castle 3 days before the ritual. Maya saw her first from the gardens, where she was helping old Tomas transplant lavender seedlings. The carriage that entered through the main gates was absurdly elaborate, all polished black wood, with silver details that shone under the sun. The horses pulling it were white as snow. And the woman who stepped out of the carriage was even more elaborate. Sarah Valtoria had the kind of beauty that looked engineered in a laboratory, every feature calculated for maximum impact. Her red hair flowed in perfect waves over shoulders left bare by an emerald green dress. Her eyes, an icy blue, swept across the courtyard with the efficiency of a general surveying a battlefield. And when those eyes landed on Maya, across the garden's distance, something in them gleamed. It was not curiosity, not interest. It was recognition. The kind predators feel when they identify their prey. "Who is she?" Maya asked Tomas, unable to look away. The old healer straightened with difficulty, leaning on his shovel. "Lady Sarah Valtoria, daughter of Duke Valtoria, from the eastern lands." He spat on the ground, a gesture of disdain Maya had never seen from him. "They say she came to win the king. May the gods protect us from women like her." Maya watched as Sarah was greeted by the servants, as her trunks were unloaded, as she walked into the castle with the posture of someone who already considered herself its mistress. At the Crescent Moon Ball, it was tradition for ladies from all lands to come and compete for the chance to be claimed by the king or the prince. Something in her chest tightened. A warning, maybe. A premonition. But she pushed the feeling aside. In 3 days, she would be claimed by Cedric. In 3 days, everything would change. What could a newly arrived noble do in so little time? The answer came faster than Maya expected. At dinner that night, Sarah was seated beside Cedric. Maya, relegated to a secondary table because of court conventions, as if there were conventions for someone who was not officially anything, watched as the redhead laughed at every joke the prince made, touched his arm with practiced familiarity, leaned in to whisper things that made Cedric smile in the same way he used to smile at her. It was not jealousy, Maya told herself. She had no right to feel jealous of something that was not yet hers. But it hurt. Gods. It hurt. "She's good," a voice said beside her. Maya almost dropped her glass of water. She turned and found a young woman she did not recognize. Brown hair pinned in a loose bun, eyes far too sharp for such a young face. "Sorry?" "Lady Sarah," the young woman clarified, sitting beside Maya without asking permission. "She's very good at what she does. She has already destroyed 3 engagements in the eastern lands before coming here. Rumor says she came for the king, but it seems she found a consolation prize along the way." Maya returned her gaze to the high table, where Sarah now rested her hand over Cedric's, with an intimacy that made Maya's stomach twist. "Who are you?" "Helena, 10th degree cousin of someone important enough for me to be here, but not important enough for anyone to remember my name." She shrugged. "I observe things. That's what invisible people do." "And what have you observed?" Helena tilted her head, studying Maya with a disarming frankness. "That you're about to lose a war you don't even know you're fighting. That Lady Sarah identified you as an obstacle the second she stepped out of that carriage. And that the prince—" She paused, something like pity flickering in her eyes. "The prince has never been very good at resisting things that are shiny and new." Maya swallowed hard. "Cedric promised me." "Cedric promises many things." Helena stood, smoothing her skirts. "The question is, what he keeps." She walked away before Maya could respond, disappearing among the guests as if she had never been there. Maya looked back at the high table. Cedric was laughing at something Sarah had said, his head thrown back, completely absorbed by the redhead's presence. And on the elevated throne, Kaelin watched. Not Sarah, not Cedric. Her. Maya felt the weight of that gaze like something physical, like hands pressing on her shoulders, like a question she did not know how to answer. "What do you want from me?" The king looked away first, turning his attention to the counselor approaching him. But Maya could still feel the warmth where that gaze had touched, like an invisible mark burning on her skin. The next 3 days were an exercise in torture. Sarah seemed to be everywhere at once, in the gardens when Maya walked to training, in the corridors when she returned to her quarters, at meals taking the place that should have been hers at Cedric's side. The redhead was not openly hostile. She was worse than that. She was sweet, polite. She spoke to Maya with such exaggerated kindness it bordered on insult, always finding subtle ways to highlight everything that set them apart. "What a lovely dress," Sarah said one day, meeting Maya in the corridor. "It is so practical, perfect for someone who spends so much time on the training fields." "Maya, dear, you have to teach me how you manage to train with the men without completely ruining your hands. Mine would be destroyed." "Oh, you are helping the healer again? How dedicated. It is so nice to see someone who knows her place." Every word was a fine cut, almost invisible, but it bled just the same. And Cedric was disappearing. Not physically. He was still there, still appeared at dinners, still smiled at Maya when their eyes met. But there was a new distance, a hesitation where there used to be certainty. He no longer sought her out between events. He did not wait for her after training. He did not whisper jokes in her ear or make her feel like she was the only person in the room. On the eve of the ritual, Maya found him alone in the gardens. "Cedric." He turned, and for a moment, only a moment, she saw something like guilt flash in his eyes. "Maya." He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "What are you doing out here so late?" "Looking for you." She stepped closer, trying to ignore the alarm screaming in her chest. "I wanted to talk about tomorrow." Cedric glanced away, running a hand through his hair. "Tomorrow." "The ritual," she clarified, unnecessarily. Do you still want to claim me?" The silence that followed was the most honest answer Cedric had given in weeks. "Maya." He sighed, still not looking at her. "Things have gotten complicated." "Complicated how?" "The council is pressuring. My brother is questioning." "You promised." Maya's voice came out steadier than she felt. "In front of everyone. You promised me." "I know." Cedric took a step toward her, his hands raised in a calming gesture. "And I will keep my word. I just need time to sort some things out." "Time? Trust me, Maya." He took her hands in his, and for a second she allowed herself to believe. "I would never let you down. You know that." But she was no longer sure she did. Maya nodded. She let him kiss her forehead, let him leave her there in the garden with a heavy heart and a mind in turmoil. The night of the ritual arrived with a moon so bright it almost looked like day. The great hall had been transformed. Torches burned in stands of ancient iron, casting dancing shadows across the stone walls. The sacred circle was drawn at the center of the marble floor, the ancestral runes glowing with a light of their own that Maya could not explain. The audience, nobles, elders, counselors, formed a ring around it, all in their finest clothes, all waiting. Maya felt like an offering about to be sacrificed. Her dress was simple, white and deep blue, with few adornments, the best she owned. She had braided her dark hair and let it fall down her back, her hands hidden in the folds of the fabric to conceal the trembling she could not control. "You are pale." Helena appeared at her side, materializing as she always did. "Breathe." "I am breathing." "No, you are hyperventilating." Helena gripped her arm with surprising firmness. "Look at me. Whatever happens today, you survive. Understood? You have survived worse." Maya wanted to ask how Helena knew what she had survived, but the sound of a gong cut through any conversation. The ritual was beginning. The young wolves were called to the center, one by one, to make their claims. Maya watched as couples formed, some expected, others surprising, each union sealed with a touch of hands and a formal declaration. The applause was polite, the smiles calculated, the entire ceremony a political choreography disguised as tradition. And then, Cedric's name was called. The prince walked to the center of the circle with his usual elegant posture. But Maya could see, because she had known him for too long, the tension in his shoulders, the way his gaze avoided hers. The elder in charge of the ceremony raised his hands. "Prince Cedric, second heir to the throne of Thornwald, have you come to make your claim?" Maya stepped forward. It was what was expected. What everyone expected. She felt the eyes turn toward her, some curious, others openly disdainful. She heard the whispers begin again. Is she really going through with this? The wolfless one? But she kept walking, because she had come too far to turn back now. Cedric saw her approaching, and lowered his head. This year, his voice came out thin, almost inaudible. This year I claim no one. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya stopped. Her feet simply stopped. As if her body had received the message before her mind could process it. Perhaps at the next ritual, Cedric added, still not looking at her. Perhaps at the next ritual. The words echoed through the hall, stripped of sound, bouncing off the walls, off the stunned faces, into Maya's soul, which felt like it was coming apart piece by piece in front of everyone. She had not been rejected. She had not been traded. She had simply been abandoned. Left there, exposed, at the center of a hall full of people who had always known she was not worthy. You were right. She wanted to scream to every voice that had humiliated her over the years. You were always right. The whispers started, then the snickers, then the heavy silence of those who watch a tragedy unfold in real time. Maya tried to step back, tried to find the strength to turn around and walk out of that hall with what little dignity she had left. But her body would not obey. She was frozen, rooted to the floor, more exposed than she had ever been in her entire life. And it was in that moment, exactly that moment, when the entire world seemed to be collapsing, that something changed. A movement at the edge of her vision, a figure rising from the ceremonial throne. Kaelin. The king descended the steps of the dais with slow, deliberate strides, each one echoing in the absolute silence that had overtaken the hall. His face was carved stone, but his eyes burned with something Maya could not name. He walked through the sacred circle as if the runes did not exist, as if the rules did not apply to him, and perhaps they did not, because he was the king, and kings made their own rules. He stopped beside Maya, so close she could feel his warmth, the scent of pine and storm and something deeper, something that made every hair on her body stand on end. Kaelin looked at Cedric. The prince visibly paled, stepping back on instinct in the face of his older brother's quiet fury. Then the king turned to the entire hall, to the gaping nobles, to the outraged elders, to Sarah frozen in place, and spoke. His voice was calm, controlled, absolutely devastating. My brother could not claim her. A pause that felt like it lasted an eternity. Because the one who will do it is me. The world exploded into chaos. Maya felt the floor vanish beneath her feet for the second time that night. But this time it was different. This time, there was something holding her. Someone. Kaelin did not touch her. He did not drag her, did not force her, did not treat her like an object to be taken. He simply extended his hand, palm up, fingers open, and waited, offering, respecting, letting her choose. Maya stared at that hand as if it belonged to some otherworldly creature. She looked at the king's face, searching for some explanation, some motive, something that might make sense. She found nothing but certainty. She did not know why she did what she did. Maybe it was desperation, maybe instinct, maybe something deeper, something that had been waiting for this moment for years without her knowing. Her hand found his, and when her skin touched Kaelin's, something inside Maya, something that had been silent, stirred. A warm spark shot through her chest, climbed her throat, made her heart skip a beat. And then it faded, leaving only weak knees and a trail of sensation she could not explain. Maya's eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. Kaelin watched her with an intensity that seemed intent on unraveling her completely. And somewhere in the shadows of the hall, Sarah Valtoria watched her carefully spun web of schemes crumble before her eyes. The wolfless girl had just been claimed by the king. The silence that followed Kaylin's declaration lasted only 3 heartbeats. After that, chaos. Voices erupted from every corner of the hall, whispers turning into exclamations, into outright protests. The elders rose from their seats, ceremonial robes billowing as they gestured in outrage. The nobles exchanged glances heavy with political calculations, already redrawing alliances in their minds. And at the center of it all, Maya remained motionless, her hand still held by Kaylin's, unable to process what had just happened. "This is an affront to tradition." Elder Morrow's voice cut through the commotion, his wrinkled face twisted in fury. "The king cannot simply... The king can." Kaylin's reply was calm, but carried the weight of 1,000 years of authority. And the king just did. He had not released Maya's hand. She noticed that with strange clarity, as if her mind were clinging to small details so it would not have to face the enormity of what was happening. His hand was warm, steady, surprisingly calloused, the hands of a warrior. "Your Majesty." Counselor Vance approached, his voice controlled, but his eyes shining with something that looked like genuine alarm. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately. There are implications that must be considered. The implications will be addressed tomorrow." Kaylin finally released Maya's hand, but only so he could position himself beside her in a way that made it clear anyone wishing to reach her would have to go through him first. Tonight, the ritual is over. But the other claims are made. The king's tone allowed no argument. "The couples formed have my blessing. The rest will have new opportunities. This ceremony is finished." He turned to Maya, and for a second his expression softened. So briefly she almost thought she had imagined it. "Come," he said, quietly enough that only she could hear. "You do not need to remain here." Maya wanted to protest, wanted to ask what was happening, why he had done that. But the words refused to come, trapped somewhere between her throat and the knot of emotions twisting inside her chest. So she simply nodded, and let the king guide her out of the hall, past shocked faces and hostile stares. The castle corridors felt different at night. Longer, darker, filled with shadows that moved at the edges of Maya's vision as she followed Kaylin through passages she had never walked before. He moved in silence, his posture rigid, never looking back to check if she followed. Maya wondered whether he regretted it, whether, now that the adrenaline had faded, he was calculating the political cost of what he had done, whether she was just a piece in some game she could not see. "Why did you do this?" The question burned on her tongue, but she did not dare speak it. Not yet. They climbed a spiral staircase that seemed endless, past guards who bowed in silent reverence, walked through an antechamber lined with ancient tapestries depicting battles and conquests. Then Kaylin stopped before a set of double doors made of dark oak, adorned with the royal crest. "These are the chambers reserved for the king's mate," he said, his voice neutral. "You will stay here." "I don't..." She swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "I do not understand what is happening." Kaylin did not answer immediately. Instead, he pushed the doors open, revealing a set of rooms that stole Maya's breath. The space was vast, a sitting area with velvet armchairs and a crackling fireplace, a study lined with shelves of books, and through a half-open door, she could glimpse a huge bed covered in white linens. Tall windows overlooked the castle gardens, and moonlight streamed through them in beams that made everything look unreal, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. "Come in," Kaylin said. It was not an order. There was something almost hesitant in his voice that did not match the image of the unshakable king. "You are safe here." Maya crossed the threshold cautiously, feeling like an intruder in a place where she did not belong. Her eyes scanned every detail: the antique furniture, the silk curtains, the soft rugs beneath her feet, searching for something that made sense, something that explained why she was here. Kaylin entered behind her, closing the doors. The sound of the bolt sliding into place made Maya's heart race. "You have no reason to fear," he said, apparently noticing her tension. "Nothing will be imposed on you." She turned to face him. In the glow of the fireplace, Kaylin looked different. Less the distant king and more human. The shadows softened the hardness of his features, and there was something in his eyes, a weariness, perhaps, or a vulnerability he usually kept hidden, that made Maya want to step closer instead of away. "Why?" The question finally escaped, carrying all the confusion and pain of the night. Kaylin walked to the fireplace, bracing one hand on the stone mantel as he looked into the flames. "Because you did not deserve to endure another humiliation." "That is not an answer." "It is the truth." He turned to face her, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made the air feel heavier. "I watched you grow on the training fields. Watched every fall, every humiliation, every time you stood again when anyone else would have given up. I saw the strength you carry, Maya, a strength you yourself fail to recognize. But before that, I watched your parents. I saw your father and mother fight beside mine at the borders, saw their loyalty, their courage. When they died in service, it was my father who promised you would never be left unprotected. He brought you to this castle, and when he was gone, that promise became mine." Maya felt something tighten in her chest. For an instant, everything made sense in a way that was almost cruel. So that's why he feels responsible. You were watching me. It was not a question. It was an understanding that had been forming for years, in all those moments when she had felt the weight of an unseen gaze on her shoulders. Yes. Kaylin did not look away, did not try to soften or explain. "I watched you." "Why?" This time, Kaylin hesitated. His expression shifted, not into coldness, but into something harder to hide. "In the beginning," he said at last, "I watched because it was my duty, because I owed your parents, and my own." He drew in a slow breath, as if preparing to cross an invisible line. But over time, it was no longer about responsibility. Maya's heart quickened. "There was something about you I could not ignore," Kaylin continued, his voice lower now. "Something that made me pay attention even when 1,000 other things demanded it. I tried to convince myself it was just admiration, respect for your determination. But tonight, when I saw you standing there, exposed like that..." He stopped, his jaw tightening sharply. "I suspected Cedric would not have the courage to claim you. I suspected you would be humiliated again, and I could not allow that." Maya held her breath. "My instinct would not allow me to leave you alone in that shame," he finished, every word slow and heavy. "And for the first time in a very long while, I did not want to fight it." Maya did not know what to say. A mix of relief, shock, and something she did not yet dare to name washed through her entire body. "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" Kaylin studied her for a long moment. "Now you rest. Tomorrow there will be time for explanations, for facing the council, for dealing with the consequences of what I've done." He walked toward the door leading to another section of the chambers, his own rooms, Maya realized with a jolt. "You will sleep here." Maya felt her cheeks warm. You do not expect me to..." "No." His answer came quickly, almost abruptly. "I expect nothing from you, Maya. If there is ever a future between us, it will be by your choice, not by duty or tradition." He opened the door and disappeared down the quiet corridor, leaving the room far too big, far too empty. And Maya, small before all that was changing too fast. She stood in the middle of the chamber, her heart pounding as if trying to escape. She went to the window as if seeking air, light, answers. The moon bathed the gardens in a cold glow, but inside her there was only warmth, a warmth that made no sense. Hours earlier, maybe minutes, maybe a lifetime, she had been tense, anxious, waiting for Cedric to finally claim her. The prince she thought she loved, the future she thought she wanted. But now she stood there with trembling hands, and she could not stop replaying the moment Kaelin extended his hand to her. His touch, his gaze, his courage, his certainty. Since that touch during the ritual, something inside her had shifted. It was not just a spark. It was as if a muscle she had never known existed had awakened, as if some ancient echo had answered his call before she even thought. What is happening to me? The question rose not as panic, but as dizziness. Her world was turning upside down, and for the first time, she did not know what she felt, did not even know who she was becoming. Hours ago, she feared losing Cedric. Now she feared remembering the king too well. Maya rested her forehead against the window, struggling to steady her breath. The future was a fog before her, uncertain, unpredictable, completely off the path she had imagined for years. And strangely, it was not fear she felt. It was something far more dangerous. The sun had barely risen when the knocks at the door yanked her out of a restless sleep. Maya shot to her feet, disoriented for a moment to find herself in silk sheets instead of the thin mattress of her old quarters. "My lady?" A female voice came from the other side of the door. "The king requests your presence at breakfast." Maya looked down at the wrinkled dress she still wore and almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. "One moment," she managed to say. When she opened the door, she found a round-faced maid with curious eyes, balancing a tray with water, towels, and what looked like a new dress. "I am Marta," the woman said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I have been assigned to serve you from today on." She set the tray on a table and held up the dress, a dark green fabric, simple in cut but clearly luxurious. "This was sent from the royal wing. The king thought you might like to change before going down." Maya took the dress, feeling the softness of the fabric between her fingers. The king thought. It was strange. Cedric had never thought about such things. He had never cared whether she had anything to wear, whether she was comfortable, whether she needed anything. He simply assumed she would be there whenever he wanted. "The council is already assembled," Marta went on, helping Maya remove the dress from the night before. "They say the discussion started before dawn. The elders are furious." "Can you tell me what they are saying?" Marta hesitated, her fingers pausing on the ties of the new dress. "I do not know if I should." "Please." Maya turned to face her. "I would rather know what awaits me." The maid bit her lip, clearly torn between caution and some budding sympathy. "They say the king has gone mad," she said at last, lowering her voice as if the walls could hear. "That choosing a woman without a wolf is an insult to the royal lineage. Some counselors are demanding that the claim be annulled. Others say that is impossible once it has been made before the sacred circle." Maya felt her stomach drop. "And Prince Cedric?" Something flickered across Marta's face. Pity, perhaps, or discomfort. "The prince withdrew to his chambers after the ritual. They say he has not left since." "Serves him right," part of Maya wanted to say. But another part, the part that had loved Cedric for years, that still carried the marks of that love like invisible scars, felt a stab of something that refused to become anger. The hall where the royal breakfast was served lay in the eastern wing of the castle. When Maya entered, with Marta at her side, she immediately felt the weight of every gaze turned toward her. The table was long, occupied by faces she recognized from the night before. Counselors, elders, a few high-ranking nobles. And at the head of the table, Kaelin. The king rose when she walked in. The gesture was small, almost subtle, but Maya saw the surprise flash across the faces around the table. Kings did not stand for anyone. Maya. He indicated the chair at his right, the place of honor, traditionally reserved for the consort. Sit. She walked to the chair on legs that did not seem to belong to her, acutely aware of every gaze tracking her, every whisper dying on lips as she passed. When she sat, she could see the faces more clearly. Counselor Vance with his calculating expression, Elder Morrow still red with indignation, and Sarah Valtoria. The redhead sat on the opposite side of the table, flawless in an ivory dress that made her look like a bride. Her eyes met Maya's, and the smile that curved her lips was as sweet as poison. Maya, dear. Sarah's voice sliced through the tense silence. What a charming dress. Green looks so good on you. It suits your origins. Maya opened her mouth to respond, but Kaelin was faster. Lady Sarah. The king's voice was ice. As I understand it, you came to this castle as a guest. Guests uphold certain courtesies, especially toward those who hold places of honor at the royal table. Sarah's smile faltered. Your Majesty, I was only nothing. Kaelin did not raise his voice, but something in his tone made even the oldest counselors straighten in their seats. Maya is mine. I chose her. Any disrespect toward her is a direct insult to the king. I trust that is clear. The silence that followed was so thick Maya could have cut it with a knife. Sarah lowered her eyes to her plate, her cheeks flushed red. Maya felt a flicker of satisfaction that she immediately tried to suppress. This was not the time for small revenges. Your Majesty. Counselor Vance cleared his throat, seizing the pause to reclaim control of the conversation. We must address the implications of last night. The council has concerns. Concerns. Kaelin repeated the word as if dissecting it. And what would those be? Miss Maya has never manifested her wolf. Vance spoke with the care of someone walking on broken glass. Tradition is clear. The royal consort must be able to bear strong heirs, without a wolf. Tradition is also clear about claims made within the sacred circle, Kaelin cut in. Once declared, they are irrevocable. Or is the council suggesting that I break ancestral oaths? Vance paled. No, Your Majesty, we merely... Then the matter is settled. Kaelin took a sip from his goblet with a calm that contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. Maya will have every protection and privilege this position grants. Anyone who questions that is questioning my authority as king. Maya watched the exchange, barely able to believe what she was witnessing. Kaelin, the distant king, the quiet ruler she had spent years admiring from afar, was defending her before the entire council, publicly, without hesitation. It was more than Cedric had ever done. The comparison rose in her mind before she could stop it, dragging with it a wave of conflicting emotions. Where Cedric made promises in whispers and backed down under pressure, Kaelin spoke openly and faced any opposition head-on. You deserve someone who is certain. His words in the stable, days ago, echoed in her mind with a new meaning. Excuse me. A familiar voice cut through her thoughts. Everyone turned to the entrance of the hall, where Cedric stood. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. The prince looked wrecked. His golden hair was tousled, dark circles hollowed his handsome face, and there was a pallor to his skin that spoke of a sleepless night. But it was his gaze, when it found hers, that struck her like a physical blow. There was pain there, regret, and something else, something that looked dangerously like desperation. Cedric. Kaelin's voice was controlled, but Maya could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. We did not expect to see you this morning. I need to speak with you. Cedric did not look away from Maya as he spoke. In private. Whatever you have to say can be said here. It cannot. The prince finally turned to his brother, and there was a challenge in his stance Maya had never seen before. Unless you want the entire court to hear what I think about what happened last night. The silence was absolute. Kaelin rose slowly, the movement loaded with a controlled tension that made the muscles in his shoulders look carved from stone. Very well. He turned to Maya, and for a second his expression softened. Finish your breakfast. Marta will stay with you. Then he walked toward Cedric, passing his brother without so much as a glance, expecting the prince to follow him out of the hall. Maya watched the two of them disappear through the doors, her heart beating in an uneven rhythm. Well? Sarah broke the silence, the poisonous smile back on her lips. This promises to be interesting. Maya did not answer. She only tightened her grip around her goblet until her fingers hurt, and tried not to think about what was happening beyond those walls. The inner gardens were the only place in the castle where Kaelin allowed himself to feel anything beyond the weight of the crown. The rose bushes his mother had planted decades earlier still bloomed there, a reminder of simpler times, back when he had been just a boy who dreamed of becoming a knight instead of a king. But today, even the roses seemed unable to soothe the storm inside his chest. You've gone insane. Cedric's voice cut through the silence the moment the garden doors closed behind them. It's the only explanation. Kaelin did not turn around. He kept his gaze fixed on the flowers, his hands clasped behind his back. Insane for doing what you did not have the courage to do? I was going to claim her. Was going to? Kaelin finally turned, and there was something dangerous in his eyes that made Cedric step back. Because from what I saw last night, you left her exposed in front of the entire court. You humiliated her in a way no decent man would, and no prince should. I didn't. Things got complicated. Cedric ran a hand through his hair in a frustrated gesture Kaelin knew far too well. Sarah showed up. The council started pressuring me, and I needed time to... To what? Decide whether Maya was convenient enough for you? That's not what happened. That is exactly what happened. Kaelin took a step toward his brother, and though he didn't raise his voice, his presence seemed to fill the entire space. You spent years keeping Maya close, offering scraps of affection to keep her waiting, without ever having the decency to be honest about what you actually wanted. And when the moment finally came to stand by your words, you backed down, as you always do. Cedric's face drained of color. You don't know what you're talking about. I know better than you think. Something old stirred in Kaelin's chest. A frustration built over years of watching his brother toy with Maya's feelings as if they were disposable trinkets. I saw it, Cedric. I saw every time you went to her when you were bored and ignored her the moment something more exciting appeared. I saw how she waited for you, how she believed your empty promises, and I saw the look on her face last night when you abandoned her. Do you really think that's what our father would have wanted? I didn't abandon her, I just needed more time. Time for what? To decide whether Sarah's blue eyes were worth more than years of loyalty? Kaelin shook his head, something between disappointment and sadness flickering in his eyes. Maya deserves someone who is certain of her. You never were. Cedric stayed silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke again, his voice was lower, weighted with an emotion Kaelin couldn't immediately identify. And you are? Certain of her? The question hit Kaelin somewhere he wasn't expecting. What are you trying to say? I'm saying that you appeared out of nowhere and claimed her in front of everyone. Cedric stepped closer, accusation sharpening his features. You, who never showed interest in anyone. You, who rejected every potential match the council presented. Suddenly, Maya is important enough for you to cause a political scandal? Kaelin felt his jaw tighten. That is none of your concern. None of my concern? Cedric let out a bitter laugh devoid of humor. You took the woman I intended to claim and say it's none of my concern. You lost her the moment you left her standing alone in that circle. Kaelin's voice was sharp as a blade. "I did not take her from you, Cedric. You threw her away." The silence that followed was heavier than anger. There was pain there, too. The pain of two brothers who had somehow become rivals over something neither fully understood. "Do you love her?" Cedric's question came out almost as a whisper. Kaelin did not answer right away. The truth was, he didn't know. What he felt for Maya was confusing. A heavy silence stretched between them before Kaelin finally spoke. "I respect her. I admire her strength. And our father protected her because he owed that to her parents." The silence grew even thicker before Kaelin continued. "We inherited that promise, Cedric." His voice was low, but firm as steel. "But you failed, and I had to repair the damage." Cedric studied his brother for a long moment, something indefinable crossing his gaze. "You've always been like this." Cedric's voice emerged low, trembling with fury, as if every word scraped against something raw. The perfect son, the exemplary prince, the unshakable king. He stepped forward, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. "And now you use our father's name just to avoid admitting the truth. That you want her. That you didn't even think for 1 second before claiming the woman I love." "Cedric." Kaelin tried, his voice still controlled. But Cedric was no longer hearing anything. He lunged forward, fast, his hand clenched into a fist, aiming for his brother's jaw. The movement was brutal. But Kaelin caught the blow midair, his hand closing around Cedric's fist like an iron shackle. No hesitation. No visible effort. Just raw strength and absolute authority. They stood face to face, the air between them crackling with something feral. "Let go," Cedric spat, trying to yank his arm back. "Stop." Kaelin's voice finally lost its calm. "Do not do this." Cedric tried to pull free again, but with a firm pivot, Kaelin twisted his body, pinning his brother from behind, his forearm locked across Cedric's chest. Cedric snarled, thrashing like a trapped animal. "Let go. You will stop only when you think clearly again." Kaelin's voice was deep now, heavy, intense. "Stop, before you do something you cannot undo." Cedric tried to break free once more. Kaelin tightened just enough to remind him which of them was stronger. "Do you know what's really happening to you?" Kaelin murmured near his brother's ear, his voice cutting. "Pride. Nothing but pride." Cedric froze for a heartbeat. "You never saw Maya for who she truly is," Kaelin went on. "You never wanted the woman who stood by you for years. You wanted what she represented for your ego." Cedric was breathing hard, trembling with rage. Kaelin released him, deliberately, stepping back and letting the prince regain his footing. And that was when he struck. "Tell me, Cedric." Kaelin lifted his chin, his gaze steady, almost merciless. "If I undo what I did, if I annul the claim right now, would you claim her?" Cedric opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Kaelin took another step toward him. "And if you did, would it be because you want her?" A deadly pause. "Or because your pride is wounded?" The words cut through Cedric like a blade. Without another word, Cedric turned on his heel and left, abandoning the king alone among his mother's roses. Kaelin remained there for a long time, staring at the flowers without really seeing them. "You want her too." Cedric's words echoed in his mind, dragging up sensations he had been trying to suppress for far longer than he cared to admit. He thought of Maya, of the way she lifted her chin whenever she refused to show weakness, of the spark in her eyes when she managed to knock down an opponent during training. And he thought of how, since the previous night, every time she walked into a room, something in his chest seemed to tighten in a way he could not explain. It was unsettling. It was frightening. And in a way he could not begin to understand, it was also liberating. Kaelin shook his head, forcing control back into his body. There was a kingdom to govern, a council to pacify, and a confused young woman who depended on him for protection. This was not the time for existential doubts. With one last glance at the roses, he walked back toward the castle. Maya spent the rest of the morning exploring her new chambers, trying to get used to the idea that this space was now hers. A sound at the door made her turn. Marta came in carrying a tray with lunch, her round face set in an expression that hovered between worry and barely disguised curiosity. The king sent this. She set the tray on a table near the window. He said you should eat something, and that he will come to see you tonight, if you allow it. If you allow it. Maya felt something warm spread through her chest at those words. Even now, even after everything, Kaylin still asked for permission. Tell him that yes, he can come. The afternoon passed in a haze of thoughts and uncertainty. Maya tried to read, but the words would not stick. She tried to rest, but sleep would not come. She tried not to think about Cedric, about Kaylin, about what the future might hold, but it was impossible to think of anything else. When night fell, she stood in front of the mirror, adjusting for the 10th time a dress Marta had brought her, her hair loose, falling in dark waves over her shoulders, and she wondered whether she was getting too dressed up, or not enough, or if none of it truly mattered. The knock at the door made her jump. Come in. Kaylin stepped inside, and Maya felt the air leave her lungs. The king had traded his formal clothes for something simpler, a dark tunic, riding pants, boots that showed signs of wear. His hair was looser than she had ever seen it, and without the armor of courtly formality, he looked younger, more approachable, more dangerous. Maya. He stopped a few steps away from her, as if afraid to get too close. I hope I am not intruding. You are not. She hated how small her voice sounded. I was just waiting. The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, but the closest thing to one she had ever seen on him. Waiting for me? You said you would come. I did. He walked to the window, looking out at the moon beginning to rise over the gardens. We need to talk about a few things. About what happens from now on. Maya moved closer, stopping at his side without touching him. Did the council accept it? The council had no choice. There was a faint note of satisfaction in his voice that did not match his usually controlled demeanor. The claim was made in the sacred circle. To break it would be a sacrilege none of them would dare commit. But they are not happy. No. Kaylin turned to face her, and Maya realized he was closer than she had thought. Many believe I made a mistake. And you? What do you believe? The question hung between them, heavy with meanings neither of them could quite put into words. I believe I did what was right, Kaylin said at last, his voice lower now. I believe you deserve more than what you have been given. Maya nodded, but something in her chest was still heavy, a question she could not swallow. How was it? The words slipped out before she could stop them. The conversation with Cedric. Kaylin visibly tensed. The change was subtle, a tightening of his shoulders, a clench in his jaw. But Maya noticed. She always noticed the details others ignored. It was what it needed to be, he answered, his voice losing some of the warmth it had held moments before. Is he all right? The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Kaylin stepped away from the window, taking a few strides toward the fireplace. With his back to her, his posture looked like a wall. You are worried about him. It was not a question. It was a statement, and there was something in the way he said it, something that sounded like disappointment, that made Maya's stomach sink. That is not it, she rushed to say, taking a step toward him. You are brothers. I do not want to be the reason for a war between you. I do not want you to fight because of me. Kaylin turned slowly. His eyes found hers, and she saw something there she had not expected. Vulnerability. It is not because of you. he said quietly. It is because of his choices, his failures. But, Maya. He said her name in a way that stopped her cold. Cedric made his choices. I made mine. Whatever stands between me and my brother is not something you need to carry. She wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that it was not about Cedric. Not really. It was about not wanting to tear a family apart. It was about the guilt she carried for being there, in that room, taking up a place she had never imagined would be hers. But the words would not come. And Kaylin kept looking at her like that, as if he were waiting for something, as if every second of silence confirmed a suspicion he did not want to have. The disappointment in his eyes was almost tangible. I should go, he said, already turning toward the door. You need to rest. Maya felt panic claw its way up her throat. He was pulling away. He was reading everything wrong. He was thinking she still cared for Cedric in a way she no longer did. Not after everything. Not after last night. Not after feeling Kaylin's hand in hers and realizing it was different from anything she had ever known. She moved on instinct. Or maybe it was not instinct at all. Maybe it was something that had been growing inside her since the moment he stepped down from that throne and walked to her in the middle of the hall. Maybe it was the only way she knew to show what words could not carry. Maya crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. Her hands found his face, the strong line of his jaw, the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. And before she could think, before she could regret it, she kissed him. For a second, Kaylin did not move. 1 second that felt like an eternity, during which Maya was certain she had made the biggest mistake of her life. And then his hands found her waist. The touch was firm, sure, almost possessive. He pulled her closer, erasing any space that still existed between them, and answered the kiss with an intensity that stole the breath from her lungs. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not careful or hesitant. It felt as though Kaylin had spent years holding something back that had finally found a way out, a hunger he had not known he carried until that moment. Maya felt her back hit the wall, felt his body pressed against hers, felt his warmth surround her completely. Kaylin's hands tightened on her waist, then slid up her back, then down again, as if he could not decide where to touch her first. The kiss deepened. Maya parted her lips, and when his tongue met hers, a sound escaped her throat, somewhere between a sigh and a moan, that made her blush even in the midst of that whirlwind of sensation. She had not known a kiss could be like this, had not known her body could respond this way, as if every nerve ending were on fire, as if something inside her were awakening, stretching, wanting more. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Maya kept her eyes closed for a moment, unable to face what she had just done. The heat in her cheeks was almost painful, and her heart pounded so hard she was sure Kaylin could hear it. She opened her eyes, finding his gaze only inches from hers. I do not know why I did that. It was a lie. She knew exactly why she had done it. She just did not have the courage to say it aloud. Kaylin studied her for a long moment. His hands were still on her waist, his body still keeping her pinned against the wall, and there was something in his eyes, something between surprise and a satisfaction he was trying not to show, that made her heart skip a beat. That, he said, his voice hoarse in a way she had never heard before, was unexpected. Maya felt her face burn even hotter. Sorry. I should not have. Do not apologize. Kaylin finally stepped back, putting a bit of distance between them, but his gaze never left hers. Never apologize for something like that. The air between them was still charged, still felt electric. Maya could feel every place his body had touched hers, like invisible marks on her skin. I should go, Kaylin repeated, but this time there was something different in his voice, something that sounded like reluctance. You need to rest. And I need to think. He walked to the door, but stopped before opening it. Maya. She lifted her eyes. "This does not change anything of what I said before." He looked at her over his shoulder, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her hold her breath. "If there is something between us, it will be by your choice. Not because of impulse, not out of gratitude, not out of confusion." And then he was gone, leaving her alone with her heart racing and her lips still burning. Maya leaned back against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Her legs would not hold her anymore. What did I do? She brushed her fingers over her own lips, still feeling the ghost of his kiss. And why do I want to do it again? The weeks that followed were an exercise in confusion and discovery. Maya was slowly adapting to her new life, to the luxurious chambers, the meals at the royal table, the stares that followed her through every corner of the castle. Some things had improved. No one dared insult her openly anymore, not with the king's protection hanging over her like an invisible shield. Others had grown worse. The whispers were now more cautious, more poisonous, loaded with resentment that used to be expressed through public humiliation. And then there was Cedric. The prince hadn't sought her out once since that morning in the hall. He didn't try to talk, didn't send notes, didn't show up in places she used to frequent. It was as if he had decided the best way to deal with the situation was to pretend she didn't exist. But Maya saw him. She saw him walking through the corridors with Lady Sarah at his side, the two speaking in low voices, heads tilted toward each other. She saw them strolling through the gardens, Sarah's hand resting lightly on his arm as she laughed at something he had said. She saw during meals, when Cedric's eyes found hers across the table, a flicker of something that looked like regret, before turning back to the redhead beside him. It was strange. Weeks ago, that sight would have destroyed her. It would have ripped pieces of her heart out and scattered them on the floor for others to step on. But now she felt only a distant emptiness, like looking at an old scar and remembering that it once hurt. What kept her awake at night was not Cedric. It was the kiss. It was the way Kaelin looked at her during meals, quick, discreet, but loaded with something that made her blood rush. It was the way he always found an excuse to be near her. In the gardens when she read, in the corridors when she returned from training, in the council meetings where a seat was now reserved for her. It was how, sometimes, when no one was looking, he touched her hand for a second. Just a second. As if he needed to confirm she was real. They had not kissed again. Kaelin kept a respectful distance, honoring the words he had spoken that night. But Maya could feel the tension between them growing, like a rope stretched to its limit. Every shared glance, every accidental touch, every quiet moment added more pressure to something that would inevitably snap. And there was something else. Something Maya couldn't explain. In recent days, her body had begun to change. Not physically. At least not in a visible way. But there were new sensations, strange and unsettling. Her senses felt sharper. She could hear conversations at distances she shouldn't be able to. She could pick up scents she had never noticed before. She could feel presences before seeing them. And then there were the dreams. Every night she dreamed of dark forests and full moons. She dreamed of running on 4 legs, the wind in her fur, the earth beneath her claws. She dreamed of a massive wolf with silver eyes running beside her, and she woke with her heart racing and a strange sense of loss she couldn't explain. On the 3rd week after the ritual, Maya woke in the middle of the night certain something was wrong. Not wrong. Exactly. Different. Her body burned, not with pain, with heat. A heat that seemed to rise from deep within, from a place she couldn't name. Her skin felt sensitive, every brush of the sheets amplified 1,000 times. And there was something else. A presence inside her, ancient and powerful, stirring, awakening, pushing to the surface. Maya sat up, heart hammering. What is happening to me? She stood on shaky legs and walked to the window. The moon was almost full, spilling its silver light across the castle gardens. And when Maya looked at it, truly looked, she felt something inside her respond, like a call, a recognition, as if the moon were speaking directly to a part of her that had always been asleep. The door opened behind her. Maya turned and found Kalen standing in the doorway. He wore sleep clothes, his hair tousled, his expression a mixture of worry and something far more intense. His eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, swept over her, as if searching for wounds only he could sense. "I felt you wake." His voice was rough. "My wolf." He knew, before I was fully conscious. Maya couldn't speak. The heat inside her was rising, and now that Kalen was there, now that she could feel his presence, his scent, the energy radiating from him, everything was sharper, stronger, overwhelming. "What is happening to me?" she whispered, broken. Kalen approached slowly, each step deliberate, as if walking toward something precious and fragile. "Your wolf," he said, stopping a few steps from her. "She's waking up. Finally." Maya's knees buckled, and Kalen caught her before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her with a strength that was both protective and possessive. I don't understand," she managed, gripping his shoulders like they were the only solid thing left. "Why now? After so many years?" Kalen guided her back to the bed, helping her sit. He knelt in front of her, holding her hands between his, and there was something in his eyes, something almost reverent, that made her chest tighten. "Some wolves need a catalyst to awaken," he explained softly. "Something that triggers the deepest instinct, a threat, a trauma." He paused, his thumbs tracing circles on her palms. "Or a bond." "A bond?" Kalen didn't answer right away. His eyes met hers, and she saw a question there, one he seemed afraid to ask. "When I touched your hand during the ritual," he finally said, "did you feel something?" Maya remembered the moment. The spark, the heat, the sense that something inside her had shifted for the first time. "Yes," she whispered. "I felt it." Something flickered across Kalen's face. Relief, maybe, or hope. My wolf felt it too. He guided her hand to his chest, pressing it over his heartbeat. "He recognized something in you. Something that had been sleeping, waiting." "What are you saying?" Kalen hesitated. The great king who never hesitated before councils or armies suddenly vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "I'm saying that maybe there was a reason I did what I did that night. A reason beyond protection, beyond duty." He swallowed. "I'm saying my wolf may have recognized his mate before either of us understood it." Maya felt the world stop. Mate. The word echoed through her mind, heavy with meaning she could barely process. Mates were legends, stories told to children about souls destined to find each other, about bonds that transcended choice or logic. She had never believed in them. How could she, when she didn't even have a wolf? But now, a wave of heat tore through her, more intense than anything before. Maya arched back, a sound escaping her throat, half gasp, half moan, as something inside her, something huge and ancient, finally began to break free. "Kalen," she panted, gripping his arms. He held her, one hand on her back, the other at her nape, anchoring her as her body was overtaken by waves of transformation. "Don't fight it," he whispered against her ear. "Let it happen." Maya closed her eyes and surrendered. Pain came first, a pain that felt like her bones, muscles, and cells were being reshaped from the inside out. She screamed, or maybe she howled. She couldn't tell the difference. The world dissolved into heat, pressure, expansion. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. Maya opened her eyes. Everything was different. colors sharper, sounds clearer, scents layered and intense. She could hear Kaylin's heartbeat, fast, too fast, and she could smell him in a way she never had before. She looked down and saw paws where hands should be. Black fur, midnight dark, claws glinting under the moonlight. I shifted. The thought came with startling clarity, and with it came another presence, distinct yet part of her. Her wolf. Awake at last. Maya, or the wolf she had become, lifted her head and met Kaylin's gaze. The king knelt before her, his eyes glowing gold, his own wolf pushing dangerously close to the surface. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "More than I ever imagined." Maya's wolf stepped forward and touched her nose to his cheek, an instinctive, intimate gesture that made Kaylin close his eyes with a shaky breath. And then she smelled it. The scent hit her with the force of lightning, familiar and impossibly right, like coming home after a lifetime away. Her wolf recognized it instantly, and the truth crashed through her. Mate. Kaylin was her mate. He always had been. She just couldn't know until her wolf awakened. The shift back was almost as quick as the first. In seconds, Maya was human again, naked and trembling on the floor, tears streaming down her face. Whether from joy or shock, she couldn't tell. Kaylin wrapped her in a blanket and pulled her into his arms. He was shaking too. She could feel it, as if he were barely holding himself together. "You felt it," he said, voice hoarse. "You know?" Maya looked up at him, the man who had watched her from a distance for years. The king who had risked everything to protect her. The mate she never knew she had. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "I wasn't sure." Kaylin brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gentleness making her chest ache. "My wolf suspected, but without your wolf awake, there was no way to know. No way to confirm the bond. And now?" Kaylin looked into her eyes, and she saw everything he had hidden for years. The longing, the hope, the fear of losing her before he ever had her. "Now," he murmured, lowering his forehead to hers. "I can't wait anymore. I want you." Kaylin closed his eyes with a sound that was almost a groan. "Maya, kiss me," she breathed. "Kiss me the way you wanted to all those times you watched from afar." And he kissed her. It wasn't like the first kiss. That one had been impulse, surprise, an unplanned explosion. This one was different, intentional, deliberate. A wordless declaration. Kaylin kissed her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. His hands framed her face, reverent, making her eyes burn. His lips moved against hers with slow, torturous care, savoring every second, every breath, every sound she made. When he pulled back, they were both breathless. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice so rough it was nearly unrecognizable. "Because if we keep going, I don't know if I'll be able to stop," Maya answered by pulling him back to her. What followed was fire and softness, intensity and tenderness. Kaylin touched her as if learning every inch of her skin, memorizing every curve, every sigh, every place that made her arch beneath him. And Maya discovered her body knew exactly how to respond, as if this dance had always been written inside her, waiting for the right partner. When they finally joined, Maya felt the bond complete itself. It was like a silent explosion in her chest, a final, irrevocable recognition. She could feel Kaylin not just with her body, but with her soul. She felt his emotions, his pleasure, the overwhelming love he had carried for years without knowing where to put it. Mate. The word echoed between them, unspoken, but undeniable. And when Maya finally let herself fall into pleasure's abyss, she took Kaylin with her, the two of them losing themselves in each other, the way they had always been destined to. Maya woke with the first rays of sunlight slipping through the window. For a moment, she was disoriented. Where was she? Why did her body ache in that strange but not unpleasant way? Why was there a warm weight resting around her waist? Then the memory returned. The awakening, the shift, the bond. Kaelin. She turned slowly and found the king asleep beside her. In the morning light, he looked younger, softer. The lines of worry that usually marked his face had vanished, and there was a faint ghost of a smile on his lips that made Maya's heart tighten. My mate. The thought still felt surreal. She, Maya, the woman without a wolf, the one everyone despised, was the king's destined mate. As if he felt the weight of her gaze, Kaelin opened his eyes. For a second he seemed just as disoriented as she had been. Then his eyes found hers, and a smile, a real smile, rare and precious, lit his face. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." He lifted his hand and traced the line of her jaw with his fingers. "I thought it had been a dream," he murmured. "The best dream I've ever had." Maya felt heat bloom across her face. "It wasn't a dream." "No." His eyes darkened with something she now recognized. Desire, yes, but also something deeper. "It wasn't." He pulled her closer, pressing soft kisses to her forehead, her eyelids, the tip of her nose. Gentle kisses, almost reverent, that made Maya want to laugh and cry at the same time. "The council is going to lose their minds," she said, reality beginning to seep into the perfect cocoon of that morning. "The council can go to hell." Maya laughed, a surprise sound that escaped before she could contain it. "That's not very king-like of you." "I don't care." Kaelin propped himself up on an elbow, looking at her with an intensity that stole the air from her lungs. "I spent years doing what was expected. Years being the perfect king, the unshakable leader, the man with no weaknesses. But you—" He paused, as if searching for the right words. "You are my weakness, Maya. And for the first time in my life, I don't want to be strong." Maya felt tears burn behind her eyes. "Kaelin, I love you." The words came out like a confession, like a surrender. "I think I always have. Since the first time I saw you fall on the training grounds and stand back up as if nothing had happened. Since the first time I heard you answer an insult with your chin held high. Since always." A tear slipped free, running along Maya's temple until it disappeared into her hair. "I do too," she whispered. "I think I love you too. I just didn't know it yet." Kaelin smiled, that rare smile that transformed his entire face, and kissed her again. The news spread through the castle before the sun even reached its highest point. Her wolf had awakened. Maya heard the whispers as she walked through the corridors beside Kaelin, his hand firmly intertwined with hers. Servants stopped what they were doing to stare. Guards straightened with a new kind of respect in their eyes. And the nobles, the very same ones who had laughed at her, who had bet on how long it would take for the king to realize his mistake, now looked away when she passed, as if they couldn't bear to face the living proof that they had been wrong. "You're trembling," Kaelin murmured, tightening his hold on her hand. "I'm nervous." "You don't have to be." He stopped, turning to face her in the middle of the corridor, completely ignoring the curious stares around them. "You're not the same person who walked into that hall weeks ago. You know that, don't you?" Maya wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the certainty he seemed to have in her. But the girl who had spent years being humiliated still lived somewhere inside her, and that girl was terrified. The great hall was packed when they entered. The council had been summoned in an emergency session, along with the elders, the high-ranking nobles, and anyone who held even a fragment of influence in the kingdom. Maya could feel the tension in the air, a mix of curiosity, hostility, and something that felt very much like fear. She walked beside Kaelin all the way to the dais where the throne stood, aware of every gaze tracking her. The dress Marta had chosen that morning was black with silver accents, the king's colors, and Maya knew the choice wasn't accidental. It was a statement. When they turned to face the crowd, the silence was absolute. "I've called you all here," Kaelin began, his voice echoing against the stone walls, "to end any doubt regarding the choice I made at the Crescent Moon ritual." Elder Morrow stepped forward, his face still holding the remnants of indignation he had worn since that night. "Your Majesty, with all due respect, the situation remains unchanged. A woman without a wolf cannot. She has a wolf." The 4 words dropped over the hall like stones in still water. Morrow paled. "How?" Kaelin didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Maya and gave a subtle nod. She had practiced her shift all morning, with Kaelin patiently guiding her through the process. It was still strange. Still felt like putting on a body that didn't quite fit yet. But she could do it. Maya closed her eyes and called her wolf. The transformation was smoother this time. There was still pain, but it was familiar now, almost welcome. She felt her bones rearrange, her skin bloom into fur, her senses expand 1,000-fold. When she opened her eyes, golden instead of brown, she was seeing the hall from an entirely different perspective. And the hall was in shock. Maya knew her wolf form was striking. Kaelin had said as much, with a reverence in his voice that made her blush even while she was fully shifted. And her size. She was larger than any she-wolf she had ever seen, nearly as big as the most imposing alpha males. But it wasn't her size that made the entire hall hold its breath. The old sage who had arrived at the castle weeks earlier, the one who had asked for an audience with Kaelin and said, "Your choice may have been wiser than you realize," stepped forward with wide eyes. "Ancient blood," he whispered, but in the silence of the hall, everyone heard it. "By the gods, she carries ancient blood." The murmur that followed rolled through the hall like a wave. Ancient blood. Ancestral lineage. Maya didn't fully understand what it meant, but she could see on the elders' faces that it was something monumental, something that changed everything. Elder Morrow looked as if he had swallowed his own tongue, his mouth opened and closed without sound, his face flickering between red and pale as he struggled to process what he was seeing. This is impossible," he finally managed. "The ancient bloodline went extinct centuries ago." "Apparently not," Kaelin said, and there was an almost predatory satisfaction in his voice. Maya's parents came from the northern lands, from old villages that preserved traditions forgotten by the rest of the kingdom. The lineage was sleeping inside her, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Maya shifted back, and Kaelin immediately wrapped her in his own cloak, shielding her from the stares as she caught her breath. "Do you still believe I made a mistake?" the king asked, staring directly at Morrow. The elder didn't answer. There was nothing to say. One by one, the council members bowed their heads. The nobles followed. The elders bowed as well, some reluctantly, others with what looked like genuine respect. The broken girl, the wolfless soldier everyone had despised, was now the most powerful woman in the kingdom after the king himself. Maya saw him before he could hide. Cedric stood at the back of the hall, partially concealed behind one of the pillars. He had not bowed with the others. He simply stood there, frozen, watching as the world he knew collapsed around him. His eyes met hers across the crowd. There was no anger there, no arrogance, none of the haughty pride she had grown used to over the years. There was only emptiness. A deep, devastating emptiness that made something inside Maya tighten despite everything. Cedric turned and left the hall without looking back. Maya watched him go, aware that this was the end of something. The end of the girl who had loved a prince who had never deserved her. Kaelin's hand found hers. Warm, steady, absolutely present. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Maya looked at him, her mate, her king, the man who had seen something in her long before she could see it herself, and felt a certainty she had never felt before. I am, she said. For the first time in a very long time, I truly am.